I thought he was just gone last week.
He said Matt's not coming.
Yeah, no, Matt's. Okay, let me know when we're ready and can start recording. We're good to go. Okay, no. Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for all of you for being here. Today is Tuesday, April 15, 2025, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. My name is Mike Wickers, and I'm the mayor of our great city. The first item on our agenda today is going to be a review of our business meeting tonight. We'll start, like always, with a pledge of allegiance. Who gave it last time? Do we remember?
I was there and I gave it to Matt.
And you gave it to Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. How about we go to Chief Russo? Would you like to lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then we get to do a really cool thing tonight. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but we have a special needs member of our community who actually lives pretty close to me, who won a gold medal at the Special Olympics in Turin, Italy, in just the last month and a half. And so we're going to do we're going to honor him. He's going to come in. And he'll be with his parents. I think there's some community members that want to come and see him honored as well. And then I think we have some flowers we're going to give him. And then one thing that he doesn't know yet, I'm really hoping he's kind of shy from what I understand, but I hope during Butlerville days that we can bring him up on the stage to do his award performing dance that he won the gold medal. So we'll probably kind of advertise it and make it a big deal so that people hopefully will want to come and see him perform it. He feels comfortable on the stage. And so anyway, a fun experience that we'll have tonight in the business meeting of recognizing and his name is Andy Melville. So we have our city council reports tonight as well. And then we'll move to a citizen comment period. Two standing quarterly reports tonight. So we'll have our finance report from our finance director, Scott Jurgis, and we also have our public works report from our public works director, Matt Ship. Item 7 for tonight is a public comment period for the PDD2 text amendment that we'll be discussing in a staff report later, so we won't discuss it now. And then moving on to the action items, our first is the approval or denial of the PDD2 zoning ordinance based on the height for the condominium building. Item 8.2 is consideration of ordinance 437 adopting an amended budget for the July 1st through the 25th of June. June 30th, 2025. Scott, anything you want to discuss about that?
Just a quick update. So let me pull this up. So the document that was included in the packet was the document that was discussed last go around. However, we had a adjustment to that because the day after our last council meeting, we happened to negotiate a sale on what we often term as the SWAT truck, SWAT van, I don't know, vehicle, something like that, red van, it's been referred to as times. anyhow, they were able to get that sold. So, the item that I circled at the bottom of that page, right down here, we were able to get that SWAT vehicle sold for 8,500. So that upped the net amount of revenue and expense to 42,000 from what we had in there prior to that. And so that's a change from the last budget adjustment that was presented last week. So I just wanted you to be aware that that occurred.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Any questions from the council?
No, I just have a comment on our earlier. Notification of the award to the young person.
Okay, Andy, sure.
Yeah, last week we had Tim Shriver, who's the chairman of the Special Olympics. So we know about stuff like this ahead of time. I work with Tim.
Okay.
Actually, I've had him write a letter and all that fun stuff. So we just need to disseminate that information out a little sooner. So those of us that have folks like that in our net worth,
Yeah,
be able to share and maybe even bring a little more information
yeah,
to that celebration.
good idea. Okay, we'll make sure that happens. Okay, so thanks, Scott. Anything else on your end? No?
Not for the budget adjustment.
Okay. And then we'll move to item 8.3, consideration of resolution 2025-23, approving an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County for election services. So Barbara or Shane, I don't know who wants to kind of take the lead and kind of tell us, and give us some background on this item.
On which one?
It's 8.3, the election service.
Oh. Oh, yes. So Tiffany is taking the charge on that. So it's basically just the contract for us that we need to sign. So the cost hasn't changed at all. It's the same, but they say that it most likely will go down. But nothing will be defined at this point in time. So it's just signing it with the information that we have as is right now.
A little frustrating that they can't give us the definite cost. It's been a frustrating process. So we had some conversations at the county level and hopefully that they'll get this straightened out in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
So you say the cost hasn't changed, it hasn't changed from what they proposed for this year, or hasn't changed from what last year, previous elections have been? I
No,
thought it was much higher.
the original quote from this year is not.
So,
It likely will be less. They typically quote us an amount and that's a not to exceed amount and then it will come in at an amount below that. Just this year was significantly higher than it has been in the past in terms of the initial amount they quoted us.
And it's like that for everybody in the county.
With any explanation from them about why?
so. Sorry, the explanation to me, and I talked with Lanny Chapman, was that, they did an audit and the audit told them that, they're supposed to be charging full cost to the county for election services. Instead of, they were supplementing some cost, which we, by the way, completely disagree with. So, you know, that at the conference of mayors, we let them know. You know, that's always been something, you know, we don't get a lot of services, to be honest with you, from the county. And that was one that we felt that they were, you know, were doing for us and doing a good job. And so I'll say this, they said that they charged the full cost on the last cycle that we did 2 years ago. And it was only, what did it cost us 2 years ago? Do you remember?
40,000.
45?
Yeah, 38 or something.
38, something like that. So that's why what they've quoted us and what they're saying, the actual cost is going to go way down. So I feel comfortable that it's gonna go down, but it's frustrating that they can't get us this information beforehand. So,
May I just make one quick comment while we're on the election cycle of 2025? I just want to verify that in our May newsletter, there's going to be some kind of announcement or article. I realize we don't have our city manager at the table today. But since the filing period for any candidate that wants to run in this municipal election, which in Cottonwood Heights is for District 3, District 4, and the mayoral seat, that is the very first week in June. So any of our citizenry who's interested in running for a city council seat needs to be made aware of that. And I don't know who, maybe Barbara or Tiffany, if you could.
It's on the website and we will have an article in the May
Super.
newsletter.
And it's been noticed, which means it's gone out in email and public, on the public notice website.
Great, super. Thank you very much. I figured as much, but it doesn't hurt to verify.
Yeah.
right? Yep,
Good to
yep.
check.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so that's item 8.3. Item 8.4 is consideration of resolution 2025-24, accepting a bid and approving entry into a construction contract with Premier Striping Inc. for the 2025 through 2027 citywide striping project. So Matt, tell us about that. So it looks like it's a new vendor.
This is a new vendor. We brought this back a few councils ago. With the original contract, we were going to extend the one we were using. Council requested we go out to bid. We did so, and we had two bidders on the project, Premier Striping and then Road Safe, I believe is the other name of the company. Vastly different in their pricing, about $150,000 left on the table. So we are going forward. We've never used Premier, first time we've had them, but they have some pretty decent references. So we're pushing forward with that, and we're following direction of the council. We've asked for a longer contract so that we can do this work throughout the year as opposed to waiting till the last minute.
Did All-Star not file?
No,
Oh,
no, I did not.
interesting.
Well, All-Star actually got swallowed up by Road Safe.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah, they
through-
filed,
I
but
got it.
they use Road Safe's prices where they've tried on a few occasions to bid on our jobs, and they've always come in extremely high. I'm not sure why, but they've always been way up there. We haven't been able to use them, but they swallowed up the other company.
Okay. That makes sense. Perfect. Okay, awesome. Item 8.5, consideration of resolution 2025-25, approving an appointment to the planning commission. Jared, you're online. Tell us a little bit about Rusty. Or Ruben.
so-
Does he goes by Rusty, right?
Goes by Rusty, correct. I mean, it's Ruben, but he goes by Rusty. And Mike and I interviewed him. Has a great interest in land use. He's actually been a commercial banker and involved in real estate for quite a number of years. He's excited to serve. And so he's actually from District 2, which is where our vacancy was, and he will be the alternate planning commission member as well.
He'll be the alternate. Okay. Which means he doesn't vote unless somebody's missing, correct?
Correct.
Great. Any questions, discussion? Great. Thank you, Jared. So item 8.6, consideration of resolution 2025-26, indicating intent to annex an unincorporated area, setting a hearing to consider such annexation and directing publication of hearing notice. So Shane, this is the intent to set a 30-day notice to our residents for comment, correct? Or I'll let you give us the background.
This is a annexation without a petition under section 10-2418 of the code. And so that process can be used in limited circumstances involving the annexation of an unincorporated peninsula or an island. And the decision has been made to go ahead and use that for the annexation of the Water Vista Way neighborhood. Which comprises about a little over 16 acres. All the residences along Water Vista Way, and then I think there's at least one that fronts on Creek Road. This is the initial step in that process. The council expresses an intent to do that. We have previously received written consents from, I think, well, over 75%, probably closer to 100% of the residences who say they have wanted to annex into the city. And so the next step would be for the council to express its intent to pursue that annexation. And then we'll be setting this resolution, will be setting a public hearing for May 20th. Before then, we need to do some noticing and send out notices to some other governmental entities. So that will all be happening in the coming weeks, leading up to the hearing on May 20th.
Councilmember Highland, anything you want to add?
Just to point out that this particular area is in the agreement between Sandy City and Cottonwood Heights in 2014 to come to Cottonwood Heights because they are currently in the Recreation Center District. This one makes sense. It's highly supported, of course, by the residents there. I think we are at 95%, if not 100% of those who want to join us. Appreciate the support in getting this done.
Right. Awesome.
I'd just like to comment that I really appreciate the work that Councilmember Highland has done over the course of the last year. It's been tremendously time consuming and tedious, and so thank you very much for your service in that area.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. And if this hadn't happened in 2027, they would have automatically just gone to Sandy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we're happy to have them. Yep, awesome. Okay, so we'll be setting that 30-day period. Item 8.7 is consideration of resolution 2025-27, approving a memorandum of agreement with the Utah Department of Transportation and the Utah State Historic Preservation Officer regarding Butlerville Historic Monument. So Shane, sorry, Shane, I mean Jared, why don't you give us some background?
I was gonna let Shane do it. That's fine.
Oh.
Just kidding. I'm gonna leave my video off because apparently I'm experiencing some network issues here. So this is the historic committee actually already decided to do a monument in front of Butler Elementary, and they were kind of in the middle of planning it when UDOT approached them as part of their SR 190 merge lane improvements. They have some funding that needs to go towards some I guess some historic places, markers. They're disturbing some existing ones, I believe, up the canyon. So they came to us and they said, "Hey, is there anything we can do with the city to work on this?" And it was just kind of a perfect opportunity. So they're donating $10,000 towards this monument. It'll be a little bit different now.
Jared.
You go.
I don't understand what merge lane are they referring to on SR 190? Anybody know?
It's apparently at Fort Union, so. The project is called SR 190 at Fort Union Merge Lane.
Yeah.
Well, my understanding is that the right-hand turn lane, which I wouldn't call a merge lane, I didn't see a diagram in the appendices, and I don't really understand what part of that intersection they're referring to. Was there a taking? I'd like a little more clarification on. I don't see how that correlates with a donation to a historic monument.
Apparently, where they're building it will affect an archaeological property that's eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. So that's the reason they're offering the $10,000. I haven't seen a map of the underlying project. This memorandum, it just involves UDOT and the state historic preservation officer, and then city is invited to join as a interested party.
So it must be on the northwest corner. Is that where the archaeological, but I'm trying to think what merge lane, I don't know,
Before we
Anyway.
vote, if we can get Jared back, we'll make sure he maybe clarifies for us, unless somebody else knows. Okay,
So is this gonna be a plaque then in front of Butler Elementary?
good question.
Oh, okay.
So if I can, so Anne is working right now to work on some masonry, some stonework, as well as a plaque. The historic committee changed their mind last week, and so now they're going back, kind of redesigning what they're looking at right now.
Okay.
So we'll have some options for you guys
Okay.
in the future.
So
Perfect.
what we're voting just to approve the funds?
Yep.
To accept.
Accept it.
UDOT wants to give us
Okay.
$10,000, is what it boils down.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the city council work and business meetings for March 4th, March 18th, and April 1st. So, is that correct?
Yeah, then, Councilmember Burrell has some edits to the April 1st minutes, so we will move those to the next meeting, but the other two have been approved.
Okay, so when we get the motion, if you'll include the 4th and the 18th, we'll approve the 4th. and the 18th.
I'll motion that we approve the two meetings of March, the meeting minutes for the first and only two meetings of March.
If you'll do that tonight when we.
Oh, okay,
do the
super, that's right, okay.
Yeah.
All good.
Yep, perfect, thanks. Okay, back to item, our work session agenda, item number 3, our staff reports. So we are going to start with, item A, which is a PDD 2 text amendment. And that, we've discussed in the past that we're ready now to do the public hearing and to vote on later tonight. So let's go, Jared, how you doing? You doing better?
I think I'm better now that I'm on my phone instead.
Okay.
So when you get down here, don't expect a great Wi-Fi experience.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, Jared is at a city manager conference in St. George that the rest of the council will be heading to tomorrow for a city council conference with the League of Cities. Okay, so Jared, go ahead. Let's talk about the PDD 2 text amendment.
Yeah, so this is on for tonight in the business session, obviously. This is something we've talked about a couple of times, I think, this year already. Unfortunately, Mike is not here, so you get me, and it looks like Ian's here, so maybe Ian instead of me if I misspeak here, but this, and I think, is anybody from Rimrock in the room as well? So if you have questions, I think that's kind of what we wanted to bring this for, was just to see if there's any questions, any clarifications that we needed to make from the last time we discussed it. It has been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, I believe in February or March. I think it's February, Ian. I think it was a lot when it went to Planning Commission. So we're really here just to answer any questions or get some clarification if you need any.
So, so basically, the specifics are, we're recommending a specific, did the planning commission recommended a specific height? Is that right, Ian?
I don't recall. This was Mike's project. I'm not sure that I was at their meeting where they voted on it.
Yeah, I think there was talk. The maximum was 150 is what the ask was. I don't know if they changed that or if they just set up to 150.
It's for 9 to 10 stories and a maximum of 150 feet.
Yeah.
But I believe it's 14 stories.
9 to 10 unit floors then, yeah, right.
Yeah, 12 to 14 stories overall with the parking.
And the original, the original ask for this development was a maximum of 12 stories. Is that correct?
12 to 14 with the parking structure. So 9 to 10 floors of condo units.
Yeah, I understand that's what they're asking for now. I'm asking what the original,
In 2021, I'm not sure.
I was told it was 12 stories total max. So I just think that's pertinent to our discussion.
So whatever they asked for in 21 didn't get approved. It, they decided to push that. So whether or not they asked for it, they decided to not finalize the approval of the height or stories at that time and pushed it to when Rockworth wanted to come back. And so they're back now. Did I say anything wrong, Shane?
No, I just, you know, the PDD ordinance was adopted, I think, in August of 2021, and the verbiage is here. The original verbiage from that says final building height, size, footprint, total unit count, parking, and other details concerning the proposed condominium use shall be determined through an amendment to this ordinance, and the development plan reviewed and approved by the council in its legislative discretion.
So they just
It was just open-ended. They may have thrown some things up on the screen, but the ordinance didn't adopt any heights or sizes or things like that.
Yeah, I'm not talking about what was adopted. I'm talking about what was presented.
Okay, so, questions, comments, discussion from the council?
You see the citizen comment about where the height was measured from? Submitted today.
No.
There was a comment from Patrick Boyce who said, recommended we take a look at our section 19.51.00. concerning maximum building height in a tier 1 PD zone. And wondering where we were measuring if we were being accurate and where we're measuring the height and average elevation from.
So I think the confusion on that one, and I'm not sure how the planning commission came out on this, but the requirement in the code, it's measured from Wasatch Boulevard, and so he was referring to the bend in Old Wasatch and Wasatch that comes up there and goes into Holiday.
Okay, right about that then.
No,
Okay,
no.
I'm not sure what the distance is from that roadway. I tried to measure it out a little bit, but I don't have the tools here. But it looks like it's over 100 feet. But maybe if Rockworth's there, they can verify that. But I'm not sure, and maybe Shane can verify where that measurement in the code was meant to be from and where that is supposed to be.
The clarification I know given to the developer was from SR 190,
Okay,
from Old Wasatch. So I know that's what was communicated, correct? Right. Yeah, okay. Okay, and that's, if you remember, so when the PDD 2 was created for this project, that's where they put into the actual ordinance, the setbacks that they could apply to go up to based on, or the height that they could apply for based upon setback from SR 190. Okay.
and it was discussed that could be as high as 300 feet, but we wanted to cap it at more than 150.
Well, that's based on the most westerly edge of the building falls within the zone that maxed out at 150 feet.
If they pushed their building back 10, 15 more feet, they could go to 300 feet. But they're not interested in that. Thank goodness, yeah.
I do have verification the planning commission motion was for 150 feet max.
Okay,
So
Which is the maximum.
measured from the northwest corner at Wasatch Boulevard.
Well, while we're not here to revisit whether this PDD 2 was passed and how it was put together, I do feel compelled as a city council representative for District 4, in which this project falls, that I have grave concern that building a building that is going to be more than twice as tall as any other building in the foothills of the Wasatch between Mill Creek and Draper, on an area that is known to be sand, and in a major earthquake, which we are about, tens of thousands of years beyond the normal cycle of a major earthquake in this region. Building habitable structures, especially of this magnitude, in a place where it's being built just feet away from these major fault lines, and especially on a sandy base, the liquefaction and other factors, I will not be voting in favor of this height, because I cannot support this kind of density, especially residential density, in a place that, should there be a major earthquake, even with the design features that we know of today, the risk to life and limb to me is too great of a risk. And the other thing that I also have a real concern for is this kind of height of steel, glass, and concrete in a place that is the gateway to one of the most treasured places in the state of Utah, and that's Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I think it's our responsibility to protect a place that, once it's built out for commercial purposes, will never be able to change. So for those two reasons, I will not be able to support voting in favor of this maximum height of 150 feet.
thank you for that opinion. Any other comments?
Is there a maximum height that you would support?
Well, I generally, don't support putting high density housing in a place like this. And I think that a height much closer to 100 feet, something that is, in Cottonwood Heights, in that area, in the Canyon Corporate Center, for instance, it's, I believe, 5 stories. So to go to 14 stories, even though it's up against the backdrop of the gravel pit area, I realized in scale that may seem doable, and it certainly appears in all the illustrations. But to go to the maximum possible height, I can't approve that.
Any other thoughts?
Well, we've seen this, quite a few opportunities to look over this and. We can offer.
I'm always torn about affordable, when you say affordable housing, I think attainable housing and just housing in general. We need housing.
That's what I
Period.
think about
Well,
these issues.
15% out of the hundreds and hundreds of apartments and condominiums will be 80% of AMI. So while this will contribute I don't know, what would be approximately 50 units toward attainable housing, which is a good thing. But again, and I've met for hours and hours with geologists. I realize Geostrata, who we contract with for Cottonwood Heights, has approved the whole thing. But again, it's still a risk, that, proposition.
I think we're all at risk. I sort of think so. Yeah. It's a good, fair point.
Yeah, I've looked at the renderings of how it's gonna look. It's interesting because really from the west side, you're gonna see the hotel first. The hotel will sit in front of the condominium building. The condominium building from where it meets, goes level to the road will only be another 35, 40 feet, which is the height of a home. And so, I don't see some of the things that have been mentioned about it. So, but I think I'm glad for everybody's opinion. I appreciate you expressing yours, Councilmember Burrell. So we will move on if there's no other comment on this item. To item B under staff reports, which is what we framed as a form-based code discussion. We know that the Planning Commission has done a lot of work to help create this new code that we're going to consider. And so what I wanted to do is, and I don't know if Jared, you're going to lead the discussion, or Ian, but so we wanted to take a couple specific items and talk about as a council where we're comfortable moving forward with that and see if we want to make any changes to it. So Jared, or you want to lead this start, or are we going to move to Ian, or tell me?
Yeah, that's fine.
Jared, okay.
And again, because Mike isn't here, you get me. So we know there's been some concern. We know that, I know that Mike and his staff has met with, I think, all of you on the form-based code. Those comments have not been incorporated yet because we wanted to make sure we were heading in the right direction before we made overall changes to the form-based code. And the direction I was given was to go ahead and focus on chapters 3 and chapters 5, which are the use and the building type chapters. So Ian's kind of here as well to again, keep me on track and then take notes as we have this discussion to make sure we're going the right direction. We also have this on for the May 6th meeting as well. So kind of what we're here for now is to get direction, make sure we're heading where you want us to head with the form-based code before we start making those changes. And May 6th, we can kind of have a more in-depth conversation. I've got chapters 3 and 5 cut out that we can throw up on the screen if you want to take a look at them and discuss anything specific in them, or if you all just kind of want to start in and talk. One of the other directions also was to kind of pull out the Union Park area as well for this discussion and just talk about the other 2 areas that are in the form-based code and maybe focus on those and use those as kind of the trial areas that we want to move forward with the form-based code on. So
let's throw it up on the screen as well for the benefit of those who are here.
So if Tiffany or Alex can do that for me, I can't do it from my phone.
Well, pulling that up, because I make some just general
Yes.
points. So I appreciate that, when I met with Jared last month, I asked if there was anybody else that I could talk to about form-based code, other than, the contractor who put it together for us and those of us who have reviewed it. And I had an hour Zoom meeting conversation with a group in Colorado. Jared, is that where they are? I think. Maybe it's not important.
I think they're based in Chicago, but I can't remember.
Okay. But they've had lots of experience with form-based code. And they were gracious enough to give me the hour to ask a lot of questions. And I did make a couple of notes that I wanted to express to the council. They looked at our document and they said it's very detailed, maybe too detailed for certain areas, and maybe too much for our population. Using traditional zoning with elements of form-based code may be better suited for our city. And of course, they said they could help us integrate form-based code into the bigger picture of our development regulation. And then they asked something that I really hadn't considered, and that's this: do we have the staff to incorporate such a sophisticated document? Remember, the enforcement side usually comes from the complaints. And I want to be very clear that when I ask this question about, do we have the staff to incorporate a sophisticated document? I'm looking out for the staff and what they're already having to do. And do they have the capacity to do the enforcement for such a detailed document? So the general gist of the conversation was, maybe it's overkill. If there's 10 elements of form-based code, maybe we want to use 5. We've gone through, and I appreciate that we have met, 2 of us at a time with planning, and we did go through all of the uses, and I appreciate you taking our comments on the uses. It's really the building type that I'm a little bit stuck on, because every picture that we see does not show these massive transmission lines that we will have to deal with in the renderings. So I don't know how to approach the building type section 5 and how to come to consensus on what we want that to look like, especially in the town center. So that's how I would like to maybe start off the conversation.
So let's go right to you, Jared, about staff. Do you have some thoughts about that point from Councilmember Hutton? Jared.
I see how he does it now.
There he is.
Just paying it.
I see him. Jared, can you hear us?
Now I'm here. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Bad week to be out of town.
So did you hear my question?
No, sorry.
So from what did you hear Councilmember Highland's point, hopefully?
But I heard the building types and concerns about the building types.
Worries about putting too much on staff.
Yeah.
And so do you think there's capacity and the ability to handle an intensive form-based code requests?
I talked to Mike about this and I did have that conversation with him, and he didn't seem overly concerned with it. It would just be enforcing similar to how we enforce the current, development code, with a few more requirements in there. It's not the most intensive form-based code I've seen. But yeah, there may still be a little bit of a concern there, and we can talk about that a little bit more with Mike and make sure that he's really being honest about having, I'm not saying he's dishonest, but he's really being honest with himself about having the staff and the ability to enforce this.
Ian, you're part of that staff. How do you feel?
I mean, obviously Mike is the department head, so he's kind of in charge of that. I think that the form-based code was written almost as like a how-to manual for how to develop property in the form-based code. So when a project would apply to develop in the form-based code, we would pretty much check all of the different chapters for requirements. All these tables in here, we would kind of look through and make sure that the project meets these requirements. It's a bit more intuitive than our current city code, to be honest with you. I do think there would be probably growing pains, like there would be with any major code adoption, but yeah, I would kind of leave it up to Jared and Mike how they feel about their staff handling it.
Any opinions on Councilmember Highland's suggestion of maybe pulling some of the requirements out and making it less intense? Any thoughts on that?
I don't really have any thoughts on that at this time. I kind of leave that up to you guys. There's definitely a line you have to walk between being too prescriptive and getting the type of development that you want to see that will last a long time in the city. We've kind of leaned on our consultant for advice on that, but you guys may have your own thoughts.
Well, I have a few thoughts on it. I'd like to interject.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of smart city planning. And from the research that I've done and speaking with people that are far more sophisticated in this area than me, the thing that I really like about form-based code is that I think that with enough involvement from the community, And that would be one of the few perhaps criticisms I would give so far in the form-based code process. I don't think there's been enough community interaction and engagement. But from what I can understand, the big difference between the kind of code that we have been using in this city that I think can somewhat politicize the process versus a form-based code that clearly sets out for everyone to understand. It's very transparent to the staff, the council, the public, and the developer. And I think it could save time and be a greater efficiency ultimately. And I do agree that on the front side, it's heavy on the front side, although staff has been working for at least a year with VODA, Mark from VODA, to develop the initial form-based 2 years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I see it as a way, especially as we try to establish kind of a Main Street area from the new town center westward to roughly Montview Park. And we're trying to help the businesses as they want to regentrify or sell, to fill in, or to, I should say, you know, rebuild in ways that are mixed use, basically mixed use developments that start to do away with all these strip mall oceans of asphalt and things that are aesthetically undesirable, and also hard on our local businesses. Again, I see it as an economic positive. I see it aligning with smart city planning more so than our current processes we use, PUDs and PDDs and such.
Thank you. Councilmember Newell.
Yeah, I like what Councilmember just stated. And I also wanted to add that I think that with our continued development that we can have, you know, this is all part of putting together a smart strategy to do so that we're not just allowing things to just be put into place. I think it is a lot more conducive to the way that we want to city go, the direction we want to see the city go into. And it gives us some parameters to be able to, you know, take focus of what is actually happening along the way as we start to integrate form-based code, to see what the benefits are. But I really all about, you know, making sure that we do the smart things in a strategic way to make sure that we are making our city a lot more, I would say, making things conducive to the way that we really want to see the future look. And form-based code is a big part of that.
Yeah, we do like that it allows for different uses of the same building.
Yeah.
So that it can be a little bit more adaptable over time. I had asked Jared a question earlier, and Jared, I don't think you and I ever got an answer about what's in our contract with VODA, whether they can go back and talk to us more about what's, you know, maybe too prescriptive, or if we would consider this an hourly rate for this other group to look at it. Basically, another set of eyes that's very experienced that could help give us some direction about how this applies to our particular city.
Yeah, I did.
What a contract?
Yeah, I did ask Mike about that, and he said he thinks we're pretty much spent out on that contract, and it's pretty well closed out. But we can dig into it and make sure, and then we can either work with VODA or another group, probably on an hourly rate basis, to make tweaks and changes. We do own the document, so that was in the contract, but that becomes ours as well. So
let me add, with this use section as currently written, is there any objection from the council to what's currently there?
Yes.
Okay.
We have
Let's
provided
bring-
comments on 3.0.
Bring that up and talk about it right now.
So are they the same? If you've already provided them to Mike, if there's new ones, I think if Mike's already got the ones that you provided, we just haven't made any changes in the current draft to this point. And maybe that's what we can do next time, is bring those back. But if there's new ones, we definitely need to hear them. You can bring them up here too, so it's all together too, and you can see if anybody disagrees or if you all agree as well.
Yeah, if you've already.
not new.
It's not new.
It's
You've
just
addressed
not,
it
it's
with
just
Mike
not
already.
incorporated in the current.
It's not updated yet.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it would be nice to see that.
Let's-
I've never gotten to see the comments that were made by my council colleagues. So I'd like to see that, whether it's in an Excel
Like a red
spreadsheet or
line or-
however, a red line. Because I think that's important for me to appreciate, because when I met with staff, it was just me and staff, so
Yeah,
that would be very helpful.
If-
We're okay to talk about even some of the things that you brought up with Mike, if you want, we can.
I was gonna say, are you wanting to talk about your like individual meetings and what you said about the use chapter? Chapter 5.0 in this.
I'd like to
discussion?
be provided with that in advance of a deliberation,
Yeah.
Sure,
so that I can review it and give thoughtful consideration in always the limited time that we have in these meetings to only point out where either I really agree or disagree, or, and we can all do that. I think that might be,
So I think we're scheduled for the 5th of May, so we'll get that out with enough time for you to review and we can maybe talk specifics then.
I mean, I do have comments in section 5, but I think a red line would be helpful.
Okay.
As a starting point.
I'll make that note.
and maybe with the red line, put the initials of the council member that made.
Yeah, or color code it or
comments.
something.
Yeah, that'd
Sure.
be super.
That's great direction.
I mean, I'll make a couple of general comments. There's in section 5. There's a provision that said when frontage coverage is reduced, the provided driveway should be limited to the minimum width as determined by the DRC. Well, that really means up to staff, which isn't defined in the document. Talks about primary frontage. I think that will include some views. It talks about theme and unity, but it doesn't say who's going to set the theme and unity.
The mayor. Just teasing.
And then, really, we've got this, of course, the town center that has a huge grade differential from one place to the next. And so how many stories do we want to go? And would we rather have some landscape on the front? And then allow some of the, let's say a restaurant or something to also have some concrete where they can expand and have some outdoor dining. I think those are the nitty gritty details that I don't actually feel equipped on my own to address and to make comments on. And so I would really like to see more of the big picture of what we're trying to do with the building part of this section.
Yeah, I completely agree. We have time, so we've got scheduled to the next 20 minutes. So I wonder if there's some things that we could tackle right now as a council. Number one, to me, specific being height. Could we come to what we feel comfortable? And I know the document is remind me what it is in the document, 35 or the
Building types,
height.
Right.
page that's on.
Yeah, it depends upon the building type.
Yeah.
That's why I'm struggling to tackle this part because it's very specific.
So yeah, it's gonna depend on the building type and where it's allowed within the zone. Trying to
And I
find the
think in the
page.
document, it's stories and not height, and that's something we've talked about also.
Yeah, I'd rather see
Yeah,
it
we
be
want
height, not
height.
stories.
I agree. So I wasn't aware that it could change depending upon where it is.
Yeah, so you see the different zones there, Union Park Center and the Town Center and the,
Oh, no, okay, I knew that.
and
Okay.
so all of these things can change
And there's
based on
different-
where they are.
Yeah.
And based on the building type that they are. So this is for general building requirements, and then in future pages, you have like bay building requirements, residential building requirements, townhomes. Right. So,
Well, I think that since as I can understand it, the choice that was made by staff to focus the form-based code only in certain overlay areas along Fort Union Boulevard and over near our, west commercial area. So what's that, 1300 East and Fort Union, that whole commercial area. That these are unique places that are distinctly and likely over the decades ahead going to be developed in a more commercial way. We all know that if you drive along Fort Union Boulevard from Hillside Plaza westward, a few residential houses, their driveway faces onto Fort Union Boulevard. But with urbanization, et cetera, I would see those probably being sold off in favor of these things that appear in form-based code, which brings mixed-use development. So there could still be residential along Fort Union Boulevard, which I am very much in favor of because it it's one of only two arterials that have transit. So I really favor the idea that if we need some densification, it happen along Fort Union Boulevard from Hillside Plaza westward and also along portions of Highland Drive, which already has fast-moving arterial, you know, and it has a transit line.
So I don't disagree with the concept, but I don't, in my mind, I'm not looking for Fort Union to become Sugar House, which I feel like that's
That's a big fear.
a big density. So how do we limit the look and feel of that to also, you know, get your objective of adding density, which I think would be good as well.
But I'm not aware, I don't recall even any of the building types being more than, are they any of them more than, in essence, 3 stories in height?
Some are,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
depending on the area.
8
So in
stories.
Union Park, you see up to 8 stories. I believe that in the town center node around Highland, or not Highland, around Hillside Plaza.
Mhm.
I think it's 4 stories,
So 4 stories there and as many as, I'm sorry,
as many as 8.
As
when you
many as
go
8.
within
That makes,
park.
that doesn't bother me much because you've already got tall buildings there.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
let's concentrate on Hillside and what we're trying to create in our redevelopment area there in that city area.
well, certainly one of the things that we found when the mayor and Randy Whitehead and I were in Carmel, Indiana. And the way they got the density to support their economic development around their town center was to go as high as 5 stories. Now, the reason being that from your balcony in your 5th story apartment, looking down, you could still carry on a conversation with somebody on the sidewalk who could look up and, hey, how you doing today? You know, there was a sense of human scale. Now, you know, I'm not suggesting that we have a wall of 5-story buildings on Fort Union Boulevard. However, the level of the number, and maybe we can make it proportional. You know, for 1/5 of the acreage within Fort Union are some of these, you know, higher towers. But I don't see it as a necessarily heading right toward the highest density of Sugar House to say that we want this interesting combination of building types within our form-based code.
We're drawn to Holiday, most of us,
Yeah.
are kind of like that. I do have one really kind of hard line in the sand for me, and that's on the height of the residential transition. The minimum story is 2 stories. I think given our aging population and the desire to live on 1 story, I don't know why we would mandate 2 stories in the residential.
In the
area.
transition
It could be
zones.
1
I think
story.
it changes the look and feel. Would you agree with that, Ian, or no?
I think maybe the intent of that 2 stories, I don't disagree with you that that it's a good point, that for aging folks that would present difficulties for mobility. I think the intent was probably to have that gradual transition up to a more dense land use where you're getting into these centers. And so a residential transition would provide a transition from your R18 single story zones into these more dense areas. But you could certainly look at modifying that.
So to me, I'm in agreement with everybody else that I don't like the stories in the height, and I think we need to change that. I actually really like the number 40 because it's basically 5 feet within what you can build anywhere in our entire city. You know, I mean, you're literally barely higher than what you can do. Plus, you can go 3 stories at 40 feet. You can easily do a larger first story, which we like because then it's an inviting for a retail presence on the street. And then either residential or commercial on top of that with a couple more. So I don't know what you all think about 40 feet, but I don't think I'd be in favor of more.
In that residential transition zone area.
Anywhere in the Fort Union area.
Oh, anywhere,
In the-
even in the
So in
most
the town
commercial.
center and the Fort
No,
Union,
not in the commercial, no, in the more hillside plaza area.
that'd be
So
the
I
town
think there's a place for it down in the Union Park area.
So even in the residential transition zones, what would you like to see?
I like the number 40.
as a maximum, but what about
Okay.
a minimum?
I think I like 2 stories.
You like 2 stories as a minimum?
I think
It's-
from when I've seen other 1 stories, it changes the look and feel to me.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
So I think with 40, it gives an opportunity, if it's available for grading to put parking in so that we're not concerned about them having these big parking lots out behind these buildings. I think it creates another opportunity. That extra 5 feet would be really helpful to the developer.
They can easily get 3.
I could live with that, especially as you said, perhaps it is more appropriate down where we have the, our most commercialized area in the northwest edge of the city. To look at some of that, if we are going to do height. Yeah, that's,
I like
Sounds
height
good.
better than
Than stories.
stories.
Yeah.
So
That
in
could
this
be
table,
manipulated.
yes.
you would go minimum stories and maximum height,
Yes.
and the maximum height in the UPC or Union Park Center area would be what? 8 stories would be equivalent to what?
I don't know if we need to tackle that today, but it's a really good question. What do you think? I mean, so 8 stories, you would need 90 feet probably, right?
That's not too much taller than what exists there already. I don't really know the height.
Well, for the sake of the
Buildings,
people that
but-
are here for listening in on our meeting. So the Union Park Center is when we talk about the very northwestern commercial district of Home Depot and Target and all that. And then so. Could you go through these, Ian? What's the TC?
TC is town center, so that centers around our Hillside
So
Plaza.
that's the
property.
Hillside Plaza is TC and FUB, I imagine Fort Union.
Fort Union Boulevard, so that's kind of the most general form district in this
Is
form-based
that the
code.
entire length of Fort Union Boulevard?
Not the
or-
entire length, but like it's kind of the center of the Highland Drive area. You'll also find some of it in the town center area and in the Union Park area.
Kind of think about where the strip malls are, like where the state liquor
Right,
store is.
exactly. The Whole Foods.
East, up along.
And then
Fort
what does
Union.
RT stand for?
RT is kind of the periphery of these nodes that are either adjacent to
that's the
residential
residential
areas
transition.
or, yeah.
Okay, so residential transition, Fort Union, okay, and TC is strictly the town center Hillside Plaza. Okay.
That's the town center Hillside Plaza and the adjacent.
It's the
properties around it.
RDC zone, right? The RDA zone.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Great.
So they kind of are organized there on that table from maybe most intense to least intense. You could think about it that way.
Do we want to think more about the UPC?
Well, maybe also, can you redo this table to have it reflect maximum feet of height instead of, because I think we've been talking about this for some time, that we prefer feet over stories, and I think the developers will like that better too.
The UPC, I'd love to know what the highest building is, Nick, currently in our
Yeah.
Union Park Center.
I'm not sure off the top of my head,
Okay.
but we can
Maybe when we come back next week or.
we can maybe find that out. Those buildings are kind of old, so I'm sure we couldn't pull any building plans, but we could probably estimate.
Okay.
Yeah. That would kind of show you, like, if there was new development.
I
how
think
much
we
of a
might have
different
90 to
impact it would
100 foot buildings there, right? Does anybody disagree with that?
have.
Don't know.
Pretty close.
I think like in the
Catch that.
office area near the Wasatch Boulevard exit and in that area, some of those buildings go up to 6 stories. I don't know the height, but
But that's not part of our form-based code.
No,
I
that's.
remember
now I'm
Six.
just trying to get you kind of an
Oh,
idea of the
Oh,
scale.
got it.
They're a little bit taller.
A little bit taller than 80.
No, I'm saying, aren't the ones at the Union Park area a little bit taller than that?
Oh,
Or no?
perhaps.
Yeah, this is where I'm like, I don't know how to attack this section 5
Mhm.
because I don't have.
I do think that that information, even if it's not absolutely precise, if we could get approximations on those buildings that are within our very northwestern edge of our city, I think that would be helpful.
So are we saying for the other 3, the town center and the Fort Union and the residential transition, that 40 is the number we like for all 3 of those?
You know,
I'm good with 40.
I don't, I mean, I'm thinking that the whole point of a residential transition is it's slightly less
In-
high
in the RT.
than the others. So.
We leave that one at 35? That would induce more two-story buildings than 3. Right?
And maybe again, if you can come back to us with compelling information of, why to go one way or the other. But again, my understanding is that, like, I think the mayor alluded to, you have the, R18 housing on both the north and south side of, for instance, Fort Union Boulevard. And then the idea is that there could be a transition before you get to whatever we come up with, the 40-foot maximum. So I'm envisioning that it should graduate up to the highest, so that RT should be a little bit more modest.
Even with those heights being the same, you would see some graduation with, like the residential transition area would have, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but it would have more yard requirement, the buildings would be required to not be take up so much space on the property. So you'd get that denser feel as you get into the more intense zones. It may not be a different height, but that exists in the form-based code right now. We could look at reducing the height in the residential transition zone if you guys were all interested in that.
Maybe 35?
That's what the tallest a house could be right now in our code.
In our code right now, yeah.
Yes.
35 still lets you do 3 stories in some cases.
So let's do 35, 40, and then,
To be determined.
to TBD, but why doesn't staff come back with those recommendations and your thoughts on those recommendations?
Sure.
And we can then discuss it in more detail at the next meeting.
Okay, so Union Park Center, TBD, Town Center, and then.
Why don't you give us a recommendation? Let us know the tallest building in UPC when you come back, and
Okay.
I'm okay with the recommendation.
But your thoughts are 40 feet for Town Center and Fort Union Boulevard, and then 35 for residential
Yes.
transition. Okay.
Anything else we want to tackle? We still have about another 15 minutes before we.
Yes, we could tackle the setbacks because
Yeah, let's talk about setbacks. That's a great
it's
one.
the next table 5.3. Front build to zones. And it can be 0. No setback. And looking at the different transit zones, I mean, for what we are and for what we're looking at, I don't know if 0 is in our best interest because that would put it right at the edge of the street, right?
I'd put it right to the right.
Side.
Right. What's an example of that?
Are you asking me in this city?
Yeah.
Trying to think if we have any examples in our.
Well, you do in Sugar House,
You do.
trying to not be Sugar House.
Yeah.
Sure. You also do, I mean, in Holiday, you may, I can't quite recall. Some of those buildings are very close to the public right of way. I don't know if they're right on, I'd have to go and look. You also see that in some other smaller scale neighborhoods in Salt Lake City, like 9th and 9th. That's kind of more to the same scale as Holiday rather than Sugar House. You'd certainly want to make sure that you have enough space for pedestrians to walk in the right of way. If you're gonna have those buildings right up to it, that's more Mr. Ship's lane, but
What is the current, does it tell us the current amount of the right of way?
right here, I don't believe so.
So most of our sidewalks are only, what,
5 feet
5 feet?
Our transportation master plan though shows some,
in this sidewalk section we have.
well, Fort Union.
If
Along Fort
if
Union.
we said in this TC and FUB and RT that we wanted 12-foot right of ways for walking, then would we be comfortable about bringing the buildings right up to that right of way?
Could that 12 feet include in some areas, maybe a bit of landscaping and then a bit of sidewalk? Or are you saying it all has to be sidewalk?
No, I love that too. I think. Do we,
With the pictures you've shown me where there's some art and there's some, trees, it's so inviting.
So this is all governed by the transportation master plan. It's not in the form-based code. I think we removed the streets type from this code because of concerns of overlap there. I'm not sure if it's got.
Oh, that's in,
Or
yeah, that's in section 4. That's a whole section of.
is that also?
In thinking about how we can best broach this very important subject, it seems to me that separating out and really focusing on the town center at this point in our city's development makes more sense than trying to necessarily tackle the Union Park area, which has such a completely different dynamic and usage, et cetera, et cetera. And with our town center and our imminent, development there, I think it may be prudent to really focus in the town center area and obviously residential transitioning. Well, and I guess you could say the Fort Union Boulevard as it pertains to Hillside Plaza westward to say Montview Park.
Doesn't go that far.
But.
I would even, I think that's the highlight, right?
One of the things that
Well,
Councilmember
it goes
Hyland
to like the state liquor store kind of area.
Okay.
One of the things that you brought up that's an absolute imperative that I think keeps getting shuffled away. And that's why I would like everyone to consider, let's really focus on this from the Hillside Plaza Town Center project westward, whatever that is, 2/3 of a mile. Because that's where those huge utility poles that you described, and I've shared at a number of council meetings over the last year, my concern that even though we are building these multi-use paths on the south side of Fort Union Boulevard, and I brought up the example of the young man on the scooter, he could not ride in the 2 lanes of, eastbound on Fort Union Boulevard because there's no shoulder and there's no bike lanes. He had to be on the sidewalk. He was on this new, I don't know if we call it a monolithic sidewalk, but with those big utility poles, there was literally a pedestrian leaning against the pole. He was going slow. He was trying to be so cautious. And as soon as the pedestrian stepped out, his e-scooter went flying into the roadway. And fortunately, it got all smashed up. He didn't. He did rip open his forearm. The reason I'm bringing all this up is we have unique challenges on Fort Union Boulevard that I think we as council need to really hone in on in conjunction with our town center and not get too distracted with trying to figure out the Union Park area, because it's, again, such a different creature. Does anybody support that idea of
I mean,
taking us?
I've been in agreement with that
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I'm 100% okay with. I think all three, the town center, Fort Union and residential transition make sense to do it together. Are
Yeah.
you okay with those
Yeah, oh
three?
yeah, those three all
Okay.
tie together,
Yeah.
but Union Park is just such a different animal.
From staff's perspective, we really don't see any development applications in that Union Park area, just because it is a really successful commercial area right now. We see more interest in redevelopment in that Highland Drive, Fort Union node and in the town center node.
There's the potential in the Dynatronics area, and I've heard,
Sure, yeah.
buyers interested in that. They
Some of the
could-
office stuff.
Yeah, that could completely redevelop, but I think we've still got time. I think we put our focus, like Councilmember Burrell said, into these 3 other zones, and then we can get to UPC. I'm okay with that.
I know we kind of want to definitely working towards final document. Let me just throw back in after talking to that consultant that they offered $143 an hour to go through our plan. Thought it would take about 10 hours to make some comments based on, again, their extensive experience all across the country. Would that be worth our investment to have a second set of eyes?
Wouldn't they have to travel here? I mean, the thing I'm concerned about an outside consultant in Chicago. Things that make our challenge, we have to think of mobility as being equally as important as the actual structure of the sidewalks and the buildings themselves. How does it flow? So
Yeah,
my concern about a company out of Chicago is unless we're willing to encumber the expense of bringing them in and really doing a familiarization program with them, the utility poles, the flow, our proximity to the canyons, the commuter traffic that comes through. I mean, we need to really think about this holistically, and that if I had one other criticism of our form-based code development to this point, is that it's been almost completely focused on the land development, that is the sidewalks and the buildings, and has not addressed the flow of the traffic through this area, which brings up very distinct challenges to creating a Main Street area.
yeah, it was interesting to talk to them because they have done projects from Gunnison, Colorado to San Antonio to Florida when I brought up the point about And we have 4 different seasons. We don't know how, and they talked about street types and they seem to be very knowledgeable about that. I share your concern, but I wonder if it would be worth Jared going back to them and saying, hey, what could you do in 10 hours?
Yeah, we also have some traffic studies that have just been completed that we're gonna bring in front of the council here soon. Do we have a date, Matt? Have we talked about that?
We'll give a little update on it, but it's all but written. It's just a matter of when.
So we're
we were
close.
gonna
We're
work
close
with-
to having that data, which will help us address what you're talking about.
I just wanna kind of add to your point, before about Fort Union Boulevard, as these properties get redeveloped, whether it's in form-based code or something else, the improvements to Fort Union Boulevard that are laid out in the TMP will be required. Whether that's an increased sidewalk width or more park strip for more landscaping, those facilities would be improved over time as development occurs.
Is
So
that
keep
married
in
with
mind.
this document?
I don't know the streets type very well, but I know that there was some discussion about that in the past.
And to Councilmember Highland's point previously, one side of the road could end up looking different from the other because we have the potential with conversations with Rocky Mountain that the power poles on the south side of the road could get buried, whereas the transmission lines on the north side of the road are gonna be more difficult. And so we might want to put more attention to the south side to, anyway, that's just another.
What, now, and
variable.
I'm not aware of this. There is now, it's on the table to bury those transmission and utility poles.
So we just had a meeting with Rocky Mountain Power
Uh-huh.
and asked them about the transmission lines and the power poles and telephone poles that are on that road and what the options are. For not very much money, the smaller, what do we call those? The wooden poles have the ability to be buried that
But
wouldn't,
what is
the big tall transmission lines on the
south side?
south side, or no, north side
Well, the-
are more difficult.
So, and it's the south side, which is where we're putting in the multi-use path. So so from so that's roughly, I'm trying to think where they start. I think they start about where the Murray utility area is. They're adjacent to, the UPC, the Union Park Center. And then it goes eastward to the fire station, I'm trying to think. And then they eventually go to the other side of the street. But that would be ideal if we could bury those lines, because that is a real hazard. And
It would change the look.
the
feel.
other thing that is a benefit of focusing on the south side of Fort Union Boulevard is roughly, and I keep asking for a number, I've never gotten one, I'd love to know exactly, but let's say 2/3 of the population of Cottonwood Heights lives to the south of Fort Union Boulevard. So all those who want to come up to Fort Union Boulevard, and I'll speak for them since I'm one of them, I would just as soon walk or roll along the south side of Fort Union Boulevard in our Main Street area, unless I'm going to Whitmore Library or obviously something on the north side. So if we can bury those poles, that would go a long way to make it safer and aesthetically more pleasing. And I also agree that we need to think not just of whether it's 10 or 12 foot wide, the concrete for the multi-use path, but the landscaping that makes it feel interesting and comfortable. So that I'd really like to see form-based code address. I feel strongly that way too.
Let me summarize my general concerns. We've already been through section 3 use. You have all those comments, so we could see a red line. This building type is a little bit bigger beast. We're starting to address that. The third thing that I had some real concerns about is what triggers redevelopment for existing property owners. And not making that so burdensome and in essence, taking away the value of their current property by forcing changes. So, those are-
Increasing the burden on them
yes,
by what they do, maybe bottle or something.
those are my 3 highest.
And I think it's currently, if it's expanding the building footprint, it would be subject to the new restrictions, and at least I thought, and then if it's
Yeah,
just
if it's just
remodeled
remodeled.
existing, then it would apply. And so maybe come back and make sure that that's addressed if that's
Yeah.
the case.
And I would support us taking the Union Park Center out of the document for now. That's a huge, that's easy for me to say, but that's a huge undertaking.
I want to get.
Well,
to
we
it
could just
eventually.
delay it. I'm not saying to
Yeah.
throw it in the trash can, but
Oh,
just,
me either.
delay it to
But
maybe
just
another
even
phase.
going through the document and redoing the document is a big.
Well, I know it's been discussed by you guys and by planning commission as well that like eventually, if this is successful, we'd want to expand it to other parts of the city potentially, and Union Park area could be one of those that we just eventually expand it to.
Great.
Well, that was a good discussion. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's input. We're gonna move on to item C under staff reports. And this is our first look at the fiscal year 26 proposed budget from our finance director, Scott Jurgis. So Scott, take her away.
I think Jared, we're going to.
I'm gonna try. And then Scott can have it if I drop off again.
Okay. You want me
So,
the slides?
yeah, if you can pull them up. Let's just go through them. We'll go through this fairly quickly, but I also want to emphasize that if I know that some of you have expressed some concerns or interests or changes to me, if we hit that slide, please stop us and let's discuss it at that point. So let's go to the next slide, Scott. So Scott's gone through and created the preliminary budget, a draft anyway, guided by the 5-year plan and by the feedback and the comments that we had in the retreat from earlier this year. It includes the general obligation bond, issuing 20 million of that for now. And that will go towards paying back the city the expenses that have come as part of the sales tax bond on the Hillside Plaza, as well as the paying off that sales tax bond to avoid the future debt services on that. So next slide. Sorry, these may be small on your screen. I'm not sure. There's a lot of information in here. So, but this all came from the memo that was in the packet. So hopefully none of it's new to you. He updated the projections for the 2024-2025 budget, so they're more accurate as we close out this year. The general fund ending balance is projected to be at just over $7 million as we make those payments back into the general fund as well for the costs incurred with Hillside. So that will actually be an overall decrease of 338,000, which is over $1 million better than what the adopted budget projected because we're paying back those funds again. State statute requirement is 1.3 million or 5% of our projected revenue. The city has an additional 1% that we are required to reserve in per ordinance. So that puts us at 1.5 is what we need to keep in there.
Jared,
Currently,
real quick, does that include anything, Scott, in the reimbursement from the CDRAs for road work?
No.
Not yet? Okay.
no.
So that could actually even look better.
Sure.
Okay.
And then currently, based on the previous year, we have a reserve for the compensated absences, the PTO and other costs at 732, which leaves us with just under $5 million available for appropriation this year out of the general fund. So next slide.
Wait, I have a quick question.
Oh, yep.
The reserve for compensated absences. Is that a new 732,000 every year? Is that just the carryover?
No,
Yeah,
It just basically stays on the balance sheet.
That has the chance to go down as well, right?
and it will change based on, we measure it each July 3rd or June 30th. And so it will change. So.
yeah.
To go down.
So the revenue changes for this year that we're predicting is about $100,000 increase on property taxes based on the annexations that are coming in and the small growth that we've received. Sales tax revenues, this is where we're really getting hit. We're budgeting for a $250,000 increase over the current year, but that's actually still, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, we've seen sales taxes go pretty flat right now, so we are budgeting pretty conservative on that.
Currently sitting at 2% increase, is that right? About right?
It's in some slides I'm presenting tonight, but I can't remember the percentage change that we're at right now. But we're projecting about 9,250,000. Last year we were just under 9.1 million. So, you know, we're looking at $200,000 net change year over year on $9 million. So it'd be just a tad less than well, maybe just a tad more than 2%. So.
Yeah. The county option highway sales tax, based on previous projections, we're estimating about $10,000 additional. An 80,000 decrease for the energy use tax, mainly because of I believe it was the tax cut that Enbridge, right, did.
The rate difference that they're charging.
Yeah.
But you're taking into account the Rocky Mountain Power increase?
No, that will go up, but I think it's at a reduced amount. I didn't hear the final amount.
I think they ended at 12 to 14% maybe.
We know when that goes into effect.
Think July, if I don't know, I'm guessing, but I thought it
I'll
was
put a note.
pretty close to July, so that I don't think we'll end up in a decrease to be honest. I think it'll even itself out probably.
I'll make a note and find that out.
How accurate have you been with that property tax increase? Have you looked at the current valuations of Tabachi and Water Vista Way?
Yeah, we kind of figured that Tabachi would be around a $50,000 net hit for it for this year. That's a little bit of a guesstimation because we don't have the total values for all the properties in that area easily visible to us. And then the Water Vista Way, I don't have that, but we'll only receive about a half year's net impact for that. And so we'll find out more when we get our certified rate, when that comes, because that's what we have to budget based off of. And then we'll be able to, you know, true that up. And we expect more to come in for next year because that gets measured on January 1st for the 2026 tax year, which would be the 2027 fiscal year.
You expect Tabachi to be at July 1? And
Yes,
Water Vista Way.
Water Vista Way probably by July 1 as well, if not before.
We should get
So-
roughly a half year base on both of those annexations.
The other thing with Tabachi too is since it's not all built out, Mike's in the process of trying to figure out which lots have building permits, which don't, and where they're going to fall in the next year as well.
Okay. Just curious, thank you.
Yeah. And then the fee in lieu of property tax, the vehicle tax, we're not projecting any kind of change. I think that's been pretty flat for the last little bit, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, franchise taxes, we're not predicting any change because that's the cable TV. The transient room tax, we still just have one hotel right now, so no change there.
Two.
Yeah.
Two, you're right. I was thinking one. And then the telecom franchise tax, which we have not discussed and is not included in this budget. So that is not calculated into Scott's projections. And then the overall tax revenue changes there. It's about 170,000 decrease over the current budget year, mainly due to the sales tax.
Councilmember Newell, you sat through the budget meetings. What are your thoughts on the telecom tax?
I abstained from answering that at this point. Still working through it.
The work will be through $11 to the
Yeah.
Okay, other revenue changes, Class C road funds, an increase of about 120,000. That's just through the trend for the last few years. Interest revenue is a decrease of about 200,000 as our general fund balance drops. We get less interest revenue. Additional police officers, we had the increase of 180,000 that came in for that through our contract.
Really quick, that's just reflected from what we adopted last year. We put that in as an adjustment when we did that in, I think it was October. So
Right.
reflecting back to the first budget that we adopted last year, it wasn't included there. That's why it's noted in here as a change.
Good point. The Community Health Coalition, we actually got more grant funding than we expected, so this is an adjustment there as well for the 22,000. And then total revenues, we budgeted just over 26 million, which is an increase of 22,000 over the current fiscal year budget.
So I don't see the increase of the fifth to the fifth. Is that somewhere?
That's the 400,000
Yeah, the 430.
Yeah,
Like that.
or is that,
That was, the county adopted the fifth to the fifth, and so
does that hit? us
that
for the
starts
full
on
fiscal
July
year?
1. Yeah.
starts on July 1. I don't know. We need to dig into that and figure out when the distributions will actually be, if it's going to be a 1 year or a quarterly or how they're going to do that. I don't think, Scott, I don't think it's been built in anywhere in here yet. That will be dedicated to transportation though, to the capital improvements there.
Great.
So,
Take it.
We need it.
yeah, so we'll probably do an amendment to add that in when we can figure out when those distributions are going to take place.
Last I thought I heard was quarterly, but.
Yeah. So, next slide. Sorry, this one's even smaller. This is the employee cost changes. Market adjustment. We're not doing a market adjustment this year. We're not doing a study, but we do need to look at one next year and studying where we rank with our competitors. We typically try to stay in the middle, and that's what the last one done a couple of years ago reflected. Cost of living adjustment, we're suggesting a 2% cost of living, which is about a $230,000 increase. Merit increase, we're basing off of the current STEP program, but as you've requested, we are moving away from the STEP program. But we budgeted in at 3.62%. When you take into account those who have topped out and are not eligible for a merit increase anyway, it's actually about a 2.6% increase or 241,000. Longevity bonus are for those who have topped out or at the top of their range, and that's budgeted at 1%, just under 30,000. Healthcare cost increases. This started out about 10%, or I think a little bit higher than 10%. We're down to 6.4% after our consultant negotiated the price for us. Comes out to about a $71,000 increase with some offsets that we're going to look at doing in the compensation package. It'll actually be about a $25,000 overall increase. So we're trying to save some money there so we can keep covering those premiums that we do at the current rate that we do. URS actually came back with good news this year. It's a 1% decrease of about 41,000. So the total compensation package is about a $426,000 increase. Here you'll see the elections increase that we put into the budget to account for the estimate from the clerk. We are very hopeful this will not be the full increase. It'll actually be quite a bit less than this, but they are, I guess, budgeting to the maximum, or I guess giving us the maximum estimate that it's going to cost. So we've been told this should be less. City attorney increases based on a merit increase in the contract, so that's a $7,500 increase. No change to Cottonwood Heights Recreation District or Special Service Area, except for, and you'll see this later on in here, we are budgeting a $20,000 increase as we anticipate taking over the park in Dover Hill this summer. So mayor and council budget is an overall $29,000 increase. You can see those costs there to bring the South Valley Chamber contract up to its full amount, and an increase in travel and training, and then removing the annexation study. And I know Council Member Highland, you probably want to talk about that, and Scott and I have been discussing that as well. We're trying to figure out what the costs will be for future annexations as well, so we can kind of budget that back in. And then the city manager's budget is an $85,000 increase. 35,000 of that is to cover our liability insurance premiums. We've been short on that the last few years, so we're trying to bring that back, or bring it up to where it needs to be as those premiums have continued to rise. $2,000 just for travel and training overall. Most of that will be software training as we have different software programs come online. 32,000 to Health in the Heights, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on too, but that includes a $10,000 match. There is some state funding. If we put $10,000 in, they match 10,000 for funding for programs. And then 16,000 to help fund the Sister Cities program.
Talk about this later, or do you want to talk about it while it's up?
While it's up is fine.
Okay, so I'll just address the annexation. I appreciate that we had $10,000 in this year's budget to do meets and bounds surveys, to pay for with notification requirements. And my request is that any unused portion from this year be carried over to next year, because we still have the possibility of a Creek Road East annexation, which would require some funds. There's some changes that will take place on May 7th. The annexation statutes have been changed. I just sent a note to Shane and Jared today to review those changes to see what that may do and how that might impact us, but I would respectfully request those annexation dollars go forward. The second question I have on this is the 34,000 for travel and training. What would that include? That's quite a bit. For mayor council, or what are we planning to do with that?
One of the things that we've talked about is dividing that up per council member and letting them make that determination. So obviously we have, you know, the National League of Cities in DC that we've attended in the past. That doesn't need to be attended by the entire council. You know, Councilmember Burrell has a great conference that she's going to for safety action, which is obviously very important to her. So anyway, so it would, the expectation is that we give the members of the council more leeway for what they think are ways that they can help improve doing their job. And so anyway, so that was.
Well, I had a chance to have about a 30-minute conversation with Councilmember Holton this afternoon. And well, I don't think we have time to get into it in this meeting, and I'd rather have him speak for himself. But it's a topic related to the mayor and council budget that I would like us to entertain, and it piggybacks right on what you just said, Mayor. And that is, you know, do we want to consider okay, so just to back up for 1 second. Historically, in the 3 years I've served, there hasn't been a discussion on how we, the legislative council, wants to spend, you know, this part of our budget. And the mayor and I have also talked about this. I really like the idea of looking at a way to say, you know, if there's a total amount. In fact, Jared, what is the total amount? You talked about the increase to the, you're calling it travel and training. What does that total amount come out to if it increases by 34,000?
I think it comes out to 50,000, right, Scott?
Yep.
10,000 per council members?
So have we in the past stayed within this budget of only 15,000 roughly, or 16,000 for all the travel that occurred with the council?
It's,
Or
Go ahead.
1,000 in the budget.
Last year it was 21,000,
31. And
31.
We reduced it by 15,000. And I can't remember the amount, but I think we went above it a little bit last year. I can't remember the amount off the top of my head. And I'd have to look beyond that. I can't remember.
Yeah, because one of the challenges in our city with our type of government is that the legislative branch has, in my opinion, as I understand mid-sized cities and their makeup, you know, contrastingly, you know, we really don't have a support mechanism for the legislation. We don't have a manager or a facility, et cetera. And I like the idea of looking at a way to say, coming into each year, you know, Councilmember Newell, you know, you have $11,000, you can figure out whether you spend it, you know, heavily on travel or on training or, you know, things that you as a legislator want to accomplish in a given fiscal year and so forth to each of us. And some of us may lean more heavily into travel or perhaps doing things local, who knows?
This is probably a more common model that's happening with current other councils and other cities than how we're just putting a total number and then, you know, deciding what happens during the year. So,
But I think I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is that I think it will be more supportive to us in the legislative branch of our government to have more, to decide, you know, how our budget is being spent. I realize we have to cover our administrative costs and all that, but I think this could be a real step in the right direction, and perhaps at one of the upcoming meetings, when all five of us can deliberate together, I'd like to see, do either of you have a thought on this concept?
No, the only thing I think about is, limiting expenditures for me. Focusing on things I can do locally, so I think that would be a large number for me myself. Based on the needs, but having that there, you never know what may come up. There may be an opportunity during the course of the year where you've got to go to something that's very important. I like having it there, but for me personally, I look at, because I'm a miser, I look at not utilizing those funds because they are public funds, and I would rather focus on the things that I could do locally without expending.
Well, I think we would hope that there'd be under expend for
Yeah,
each council member, to be
yeah,
honest with you. That's,
That's
yeah.
it, that's where I'm at.
Well, and we somewhat, Councilmember Holton and I were talking in context with, for instance, his passion around the Sister City program. And I have a passion around safer streets and active transportation and so forth. And it would be nice to be able to advance things, knowing that I need to keep within a confine. So I'm not necessarily gonna figure out places I can go gallivanting around the country. Please don't get me wrong. I want to. I'm also very miserly, but I do like the idea of being able to plan things that I'm trying to advance as a legislator. Because right now I'm kind of at the mercy of, going to our executive, which is our city manager, when really his budget and the things that he controls should be separate from the legislative things that I am trying to advance, because I am not part of the executive. I am part of the legislature. Anyways, I conceptually, I like looking into this more. It might require some new policy. Okay.
Oh, good, thank you.
Oh, may I just
Please
say,
don't
may I just say one other thing, on behalf of the Youth City Council? I think, as we all know, the decision was made to sell off the van that they have historically used for transportation. And with that has created some additional expense. Their budget is only at, I believe, $6,800 a year, so it's rather small. But I do want to take into consideration that, again, in order to support the SWAT program for the chief of police, the vehicle was sold off that they used for two of their annual events, which was Legislative Day in January and their annual conference in March up in Logan. So just quickly, I wanted to mention, because it does fall within our council budget.
They'll need to rent a van?
Well, this year they rented a van. They were able to fit all the council or the youth council into that singular van, but it was a greater expense than just driving a van that the city owned. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah,
I
no
just wanted to
problem.
mention that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Keep going, Scott. Jared.
Okay. So next slide starts the departmental changes. So these are the increases. Scott and I went through and looked at all the requests. These are by no means all of the requests. These are the ones that we kind of felt were almost essential, maybe not completely essential, some of them, but they're what we called our base budget, and looking at all the requests and trying to figure out what we did. So you look at the finance and IT, it's 149,000. It's really mostly IT costs. You see the GIS upgrades. There's software and server upgrades that have to happen there for us to continue operating under the licenses we have for GIS. $40,000 equipment increases. Those costs have continued to rise, and I think we got a quote back the other day for new laptops for PD, and they were $800 more than they were the last quote we got. And then $70,000 for software subscription services, and these are just costs that have continued to rise, and we haven't always adjusted the budget to meet those rising costs. There are other IT upgrades that are going to have to happen next year that equal this or more, including ones that are required by the FBI to maintain our compliance. So we'll be coming with those next year as well. Records, culture, and human resources, we're looking at a $4,600 increase, $1,000 for travel and training, and $3,600 for a wellness program. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna make a comment on the finance and IT. This is an area that's really critical for municipalities to right now. The bombardment of sabotage for public entities is increasing. There's an enormous increase in the incidents. So I have a lot of comfort in our spending budget here. Just want to make sure that we do the right thing, so we're not getting involved with products and things that will be outdated too quickly. So I want to make sure that we're being very strategic and conscious of what will be needed that can last us the longest amount of time. But this is an area that has to be addressed.
Couldn't agree more. And I think Alex and Matt both understand
Yeah.
that we are willing to make sure we are safe.
Yeah.
So,
for all
Yeah.
of us.
and you guys are awesome. Thanks.
We appreciate it. And both Alex and Matt have tried to be cost conscious on this, but this is actually without any new software or services. This is mostly equipment and current subscriptions and things moving forward. So it is a crazy world. And I know Matt's talked to me that we've seen a lot more attempts actually to get into our system than normal, especially after we had to switch over to the .gov address. So there will be more coming next year and in the years to come, I'm sure. And then City Hall maintenance, we're increasing that $12,000. The custodial contract had not been increased for a number of years, and they came back and had an increase for those services that they charge us. So,
What percentage of increase is that?
do you?
Dollars on a,
It was probably about 20 or 25%. It had been the same the 5 years of
Been the same
5
since
plus
they've been
years
here.
that I've been here.
Mhm.
And then they came back. When COVID happened, they were going to propose an increase and then they kind of kept it down. And it had been probably, I don't know, what do you think, Matt, 6 years, something like that.
We've had them here about 6 years and they haven't had an increase.
Yeah.
And we've added, and with the Public Works building and the City Hall building, there's a lot for them to take care of.
it's beyond City Hall, it includes the Public Works complex.
Right. Correct. Community and economic development, they did not have any increases that we're proposing. Police has a $32,000 increase, $2,000 for travel and training. A lot of that is for the Versaterm training for the proprietary training for the software there. And then some cell trackers that we need to purchase for them, as well as $35,000 for, again, software increases for the software that they utilize. We did remove, there's a $15,000 line item in there to convert the old Spillman system over, and I think they're working on that and are just about complete with what they're doing there. Ordinance enforcement also has no change. There is a request for a part-time evening and weekend code enforcement officer, which I would, if we can find a way to do it, we'll look at trying to do that later in the year, but right now there is no change proposed. Fire came out with a 5% estimate at 270,000 last week. I think it was last week or maybe the week before. They revised their estimate to 2.96%, which is 140,000. So there was some good news there, even though it's still an increase. Public Works increases at 202,000. That's for equipment operations. We had a little bit of a sticker shock from Salt Lake Water this year, where they have increased the fire hydrant maintenance fees for us by $125,000 to maintain our hydrants. And then this
Who made that increase?
Salt Lake City Water.
Metro or Salt Lake
Salt Lake.
City Public Utility?
Salt Lake Public Utility.
Yeah, this is to maintain our hydrants throughout the city. And I can't remember how many there are. Do you remember, Matt? I think we looked.
Not off the top of my head.
I think it's about
Have they had
Yeah.
incremental increases over the last 5 years, or is this a sudden one-time?
They've had 2 increases. They've had 1 increase since I've been here, and this is the second one. It went from about 35 to 50 and now to this.
So,
125,000 increase on top of what they were.
Well, up to 125.
up to 125, right? That's good. And then there's the $20,000 for the Dover Hill Park maintenance. We don't have an exact number on that. The Parks and Rec is looking, they're doing a study right now, and they'll include that in there and try to get us some numbers in the next week or two. But I imagine it'll be similar to some of the other parks. So we just budgeted 20,000. So overall changes, we have a $24 million budget with 1.3 million in increases over current year, and the breakouts there for personnel, UFA, and the department items. And then we get into the transfers out of the general fund, these are pretty standard, but just wanted to go through them. We dropped the capital projects fund to 2 million going into public works capital projects. Debt services total amount is going to be 2.6 million to cover land and buildings, the police vehicles, and the public works vehicles that we'll be working on this year. Stormwater fund, we transfer in 200,000 to cover approximately the difference between the fee and the 1.8 that we'll be doing in projects. So real quick, overall impact on the general fund, use of the fund balance is projected at 2.8 million. Current, make sure I'm saying this right, Scott. Budgeted ending fund balance at the end of next fiscal year will be 4.4 million. Still represents 16.9% of our projected revenues, so we're good with the state on that. And then the available appropriations at the end of next year will be 2.13. That's taking out that required hold and the other reserves that we have to hold on to that we went over at the beginning. So depending on what we under expend, that could be larger.
Yeah, that would be the budgeted ending fund balance available for appropriation. We're usually closer to 1 million, but I'll say between $500,000 and $1 million of under expend net in any given year. And so I would expect this number to be higher than this at the end of the year from a reality.
The UFA savings aren't even in there, correct?
No, they're not. No,
Right.
Other, savings off of what we have, so.
Yeah, I actually want to congratulate UFA, by the way, because we, we've had 5% increases pretty consistently. And we went to them and said, this is not sustainable. In the long term, we can't pay for the same service. And they came back with down at 2.9, which saved us $140,000 this year.
Yeah.
So we're grateful that they
Too
made.
bad
that
Riley's not here to hear
I
that.
know, they did a great effort in helping us there.
Question about
did.
the water fee. Isn't the whole purpose of that fee to pay for what we need to take care of? So why are we not considering an increase there?
There's a slight increase. It goes up, I don't know, can't remember. I think it's
Does it
3%.
automatically?
So
Automatically.
that net increase ends up to be about $80,000 on the amount on that. I can,
That offset the 200,000?
no. The 200,000 was always kind of in the early plan, and then the fee would go up roughly 30,000 each year. Let me find it real quick. I'll tell you what that is. So the fee currently would go up to $844. I think it's $820 right now, and that 3% going up gets us another $46,000. So in order to overcome the 200,000 transfer from the general fund, we would need about 12% area, roughly. So above and beyond the 3%. So you need about roughly a 15% 1 year in order to be able to do that. The schedule that we had showed a 3% increase.
So the 5th of the 5th isn't in there as well, and the 5th of the 5th can go to stormwater, correct?
I think it has to go to transportation only.
Can't go to stormwater.
We'll look into it, but I think it has to go to transportation
Okay.
or roads.
Stormwater is basically roads, right? Underneath roads.
Underneath roads. Can we use it for the overlays when we do the stormwater work? Maybe.
Your skateboarding.
Is that it?
There's a few more slides just on capital projects.
Okay.
Sorry, we're almost done.
That's okay, thanks.
So the next one talks about the stormwater. You'll see the projected revenue of 1.6. That's 200,000 short of the 1.8 that we'll need, and we do have to maintain a minimum fund balance of 500,000, which is already there. So.
Did you do the capital projects one back from that?
Oh, I missed that one. You're right. Sorry. Let me go to that one. Go back one then. Sorry, it's hard to keep. Are you on the capital projects one? I can't tell.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think it flipped on mine. So the projects that we're looking at next year is the city striping project, 200,000, obviously roadway capital projects, various projects that are in the 5-year plan for Matt's team. The 50/50 sidewalk program we do every year, hazard mitigation, ADA ramps, those are built in every year, so we have that funding available to utilize. And then rebudgeting some of the incomplete projects that will move forward into this year as well. So you have an overall fund of 2.1 with a projected ending balance of $10,000 at the end of the projects. So. And we went over stormwater. Let's go to the next one. There we go. So projected beginning fund balance for CDRA is 1.9 million. You'll see the expenses there, mostly related to the Canyon Center project. So the revenues coming in is 750,000 for the Canyon Center project, 50,000 on interest, and then 550,000 for the operational revenues from the Hillside Plaza. But you'll see those go right out on the next slide. So you'll see there's miscellaneous fees of 50,000 related to CDRA projects, 750,000 for the park at Canyon Center, and then 550,000 in our expenses from operating the Hillside Plaza. So in its current state. And then the fund balance is down below as well. Debt services fund, I think we already kind of went through this. We talked about where all the funding is going. This just breaks out a little bit more. You can see what the cost is for the buildings and for each of the vehicle fleet and for the fleets. I won't go through them. They're like I said, this is all in your memo. So in summary, this is the process on the next slide that we need to go through. So our plan is to adopt a tentative budget May 6th. That doesn't mean that we can't change it. Before we do that, if you've got anything we'd like to discuss now, or if we need to talk through some things before then, but we need to adopt the tentative budget May 6th so that it gets out for public review. There are changes that can be made before the final adoption. Final adoption has to be done by June 22nd. We've got it scheduled for the 17th right now. So, and that's it.
One other quick note is I did not yet include the tax increment related to the GO bond debt service, nor the transfer from the general fund to the debt service fund to record that expense. So once we have our pricing on the bond, then we'll add that in, but it won't have any net impact on the general fund, because that tax increment will just fully go towards that expense only, and so it wouldn't affect the overall trajectory of anything that we've gone through there.
Sorry, I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully it was helpful. And if you've got any questions now,
So we didn't address COLA and the merit. Do we plan on discussing that individually over the next couple of weeks before May 6th, or what's the plan?
it's in here if you want to discuss it now, or if kind of leave that in your hands as to how you want to. So the COLA we're presenting is a 2%, merit is 3.62, but that really comes down to about a 2.6% when you take all those who are at the top of their range out. Those who aren't eligible for that merit.
We did a comparison to other cities, and the average for the other cities that we compared to were closer to 3 to 4 at the max.
3 to 4, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a lot higher than everybody else we compared to.
How was that divided between
COLA,
for those that you?
it's interesting. That's a really, really good question. And 4, 5, 6 cities have gone away from 2 buckets. They've basically called one COLA or one merit and are doing one increase. They're not doing both. I'd probably say half of the ones that we compared to have gone to that model. Whereas the other half still have something similar to what we do. You know, Sandy was one that was higher, telling they were going 3, but their council is swearing they're not going above 1% COLA. So a max of 4. So anyway, like I said, I think we're high on what comparative to what everybody else is doing, and I think we do need to make some decisions to cut it down. I don't know if we have to make a final decision today, if we want to talk about it more individually over the next couple of weeks, but what are your thoughts?
I would recommend that we talk about, especially since Bolton and I are on the compensation
Okay.
committee and he's not here.
And he's not here, yeah.
I think that we need to talk about it outside of this meeting.
Okay, I think that's fair. Scott,
So-
need it before the tentative budget?
We don't need it before the tentative budget necessarily. We can, because we can even publish how it sits right now as a tentative budget. However, we will need it by the first meeting in June, so we have the time to incorporate it into all the documents that we bring. And, at least feedback by that meeting, so that we can incorporate it in any changes and things for that final meeting. Just so we have, valid documents that trickle through and everything else that goes with it and how it impacts ending fund balance and all that. It takes a little while to work through all the verbiage and everything that goes with the budget.
Great.
Are you planning on having the public hearing on June 17th then? Or
The public hearing would be on the,
I would recommend that we do the public hearing, the first meeting in June. With that's what I would recommend. I think that's on our budget calendar to do it that way.
I think we could have a number by the next council.
so do I, yeah.
I can go ahead and send out the numbers that I got back from the other cities too. The mayor's right. Some of them don't do a merit, but they do a market review every year as well. So it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples sometimes with some of the cities.
Well, good. Thank you all. I know that's a lot of work and we appreciate everything that goes into it. Let me ask the council, what do you think of that format that's different than what's happened in the past? Did you like that?
I do. I like being able to rehash over what we had discussions on the committee. We had clarity to the residents here in this meeting as well.
Yeah,
I think it's
great.
important.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was there was some clarity there.
Yeah.
Great, awesome.
Come on,
Thanks.
you can be honest. Come on.
No, Jared, you know, it was different, but we were.
Oh,
gonna
good.
A positive review first. So
Yeah.
anyway, we'll tell you what
Okay.
what we really think tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, tell me later.
Okay, we're gonna move on. So we're gonna move on to item D under staff reports. And so this item is entitled the Central Wasatch Commission Discussion. So I want to tell you, I'm gonna set the table a couple ways and then the council will have a discussion. First off, I want to thank, we actually have the executive director for the CWC here, Lindsay Nielsen. So she's gonna be available for questions. We even have our distinguished chair for the CWC, which is Mayor Stovastrini. Obviously the mayor of Mill Creek is here, so he'll be available. I would imagine too, if there are questions as well. So let me go ahead and kind of set the table for why this is an agenda item. So, the CWC, came into existence from basically the signers of the Mountain Accord to help and to implement the vision and of the Mountain Accord. The Mountain Accord and the staff can actually help me if I miss something. So there are some tenets that came into the Mountain Accord that cities decided were important to try to get and implement. The first one being the land exchanges. So the land exchanges consisted of the ski resorts. Were really excited about this, that we would dedicate more places for open space and that were unavailable. But in exchange for giving the ski resorts more area to build terrain or lodges or anyway. So there was that's why they were excited. So they found out pretty early on in the process that the Forestry Service couldn't actually just make those decisions, that would have to be done through federal legislation. There was a lot of momentum in the beginning. One of the things that hurt the process is there was an attempt to get a state resolution that didn't ever pass, that would have helped, I think, the process go. There's a lot of momentum and then things kind of stalled. They couldn't ever get a sponsor of a bill to get even to the floor. And so that process of moving the land exchange part of the Mountain Accord stalled and hasn't really had much movement since. There were some other transportation related tenets to the Mountain Accord. One of them being a road that would go from Little Cottonwood to the Wasatch Front to the Wasatch Back. If I'm saying something wrong, Lindsay, I'm happy for you guys to correct me and Jeff as well.
Yeah, I can, so I'm happy to let you go where you want to go, but I'm also happy to provide some history.
Okay, let me get through and then I'll let you do that. Does that work? Okay.
Okay.
So that was one of the tenants to look at the feasibility of getting an actual road that went from the Wasatch Front to the Wasatch back. There was another one that talked about the ways to provide transportation from Big Cottonwood to Little Cottonwood. There was the possibility of a tunnel, right, was explored. One of the tenants was a shuttle within Mill Creek Canyon. Anyway, one of the things that has come about when I first joined the board after I was elected of the CWC, I looked closely about how I felt the CWC was providing value. And one of the ways I found early that they were providing value was transportation. And so one of the things that happened early on that you all remember is Mayor Canute came to me and said, hey, I'd really like to get in front of UDOT making a decision about what's going to happen in Big Cottonwood Canyon, like they kind of did in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And so the city actually contributed money towards the hiring of a consultant to work with the CWC to come up with what we called the BCC map, the Big Cottonwood Canyon Mobility Action Plan, to hopefully tell UDOT, hey, some things that we think would be really successful. So we did that. I thought the process was great, and it provided to me value in the transportation arena of the Accord. Now, what's happened since? UDOT has now come out with an EIS, a record of decision for their EIS in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Unfortunately, phase 1 and 2, which I think would have been really, really helpful to help with transportation issues up at Wasatch, stalled because of lawsuits. And currently UDOT is looking into forming the new EIS for Big Cottonwood Canyon and looking at what some of the data that we helped and provided to them to do so. So one of the things that we did in our last board meeting, the board for the CWC meets 6 times a year, is we talked about the Mountain Accord, and we looked at the tenets that exist and what our objective and efforts should include. And we talked about every one of the items that I just mentioned. And then we basically decided, hey, for those of you who don't know, I've told every one of you, Salt Lake City, and Mayor Mendenhall, who's a great part of the CWC, mentions almost every meeting, hey, we'd be out of the CWC if it wasn't for the land exchange. That's our interest in being a part of the CWC. And that is now basically the only item that was mentioned in our last meeting that would be that we have the ability for the next year to focus on is the land exchange program, and trying to get a federal legislation to pass that, to basically say that. So at that point, I said, so I wanted to put it in front of the council. We had paid $50,000 a year for our membership fee to be a part of the CWC for 8 or 9 years, probably. So how long was that?
Since
Was it?
2018.
Yeah, last year we lowered it.
$2,000. So for 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22.
Right. So six years at 50. Go ahead, Alan.
Pardon me, Mayor,
You're
but
totally fine.
may we invite both Mayor Silvestrini and Lindsay Nielsen to come and join us at the table? I think we'd be able to hear and interact a little more effectively and be more welcoming.
So anyway, yeah, so last year we one of the things that the CWC board talked about in our previous budget cycle was how that membership fee was calculated. I was a little bothered that we paid more than Sandy, who had tripled our residents for a while. So I was really aware of it and concerned. And so one of the things they mentioned is they kind of modeled the population of how the League of Cities does their estimate. And so our estimate for the League of Cities was 32,000, I think. And so I asked that be our membership fee, and they agreed to lower it to that last year. So that's what we're talking about. So the question is now, and actually, maybe I'll let Lindsay, if you want to add your context to what I have said, why the CWC exists, and what the vision is, and what the emphasis would be for the next year, and happy to have Mayor Silvestrini.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick it off. So you guys know, okay, Mill Creek pays 75,000, and
Yeah.
we have paid that every year that we remember. And the value of the CWC, I mean, it's evolved just like, I think the Mountain Accord is somewhat evolved, you know, we didn't have the EIS before to deal with. There are a lot of things that have changed. There was a misunderstanding, I think, about the land exchanges. I'm not sure that those are valuable to our cities as opposed to they are to the commerce and the ski resorts. But the land exchanges may be back on in some form. I think the ski resorts misunderstood what that value had to be exchanged like for like in order for them to trade property with the Forest Service.
And they ended up walking away in 22.
But they're back in the Stakeholders Council, and they've expressed some interest in reopening the idea of the land exchanges.
Okay.
But let me tell you, I mean, from my standpoint, you know, and I think, you know, you guys as a city are 10 years older than us. So some of you may have not remembered, one of the reasons that I think Cottonwood Heights Incorporated, as well as Mill Creek, ultimately, was to get a seat at the table at some of these boards and commissions and other things that affect our residents, but where we didn't have any kind of a voice. So I can tell you, I fought really, because we weren't a city when CWC was formed, and we kind of fought to get on it. Okay. And the reason for that is, you know, just like Cottonwood Heights, Mill Creek, you know, we have a canyon that opens up into our city. Our residents use that canyon. They love it. They love the Cottonwood Canyons too, of course, but that's our adjacent one. And our city is affected by the things that go on in that canyon. It's affected by the traffic. It's affected by the parking issues that we have in Mill Creek. And I know that that's a problem in the city between the canyons, because I drive the road in the city between the canyons to try to go skiing. And without the bus bypass program that the Central Wasatch Commission funds, that would be a lot worse. That program is actually as we've gotten a little more practiced at it, we've been able to ease at least some of that congestion without the phase 1 and phase 2 busing, which I agree with you, Mayor, that I would like to bust loose the ice jam on that and get that rolling. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I know we have a lawsuit that's pending between UDOT and some of the members of the CWC and others, but I think we have a better chance of being engaged on that if we work together and we collaborate in an organization that can build consensus, which is what we're good at. It sounds like we don't do things a lot because we work to build consensus, and we have been careful to not do things that alienate one member or another and things like that. But there actually has been a lot accomplished. There's been a lot of trail work. You know, the bathrooms in the Cottonwood Canyons and Mill Creek Canyon get cleaned as a result of the collaboration between Central Wasatch Commission and some other stakeholders, but we put money toward that. Our dues go toward that. Our dues go to pay for the bus bypass program, to pay officer overtime. I don't know if Cottonwood Heights officers get that, but I know Sandy does.
No, we don't. We
For a
don't actually escort the buses. Sandy does.
Yeah.
But it does help to alleviate the overall
Yeah.
challenge.
Anyway, I'm just going to say, I mean, I think it would be, I think that the contribution that you make is not that much in the scheme of things in terms of staying at the table, having a seat at that table, which is valuable, knowing what's going on and having a voice in that you may not have if you're not a member. And while the progress may seem glacial or incremental, there actually have been improvements with those things. And I also think, in spite of the fact that, you know, UDOT did what they did on the EIS, we spent a ton of time studying that. And I think our input, you know, was valued. And we also provided a forum for a lot of people to learn about that actually, I think, went on to other activism about the gondola and things like that, they wouldn't have been as versed in the subject if it hadn't been for the work of the CWC in providing that forum. So, and I guess, just one other thing I'll say is I think there is value in the collaboration that it fosters, and doing things like putting on the Central Wasatch Symposium that we did the first year, this past year, just keeping an interest in these mountains. I mean, I know Cottonwood Heights depends upon those mountains, just like Mill Creek does for a watershed. And we've done a lot of work. CWSC funded a visitor use study that's now part of the environmental dashboard and the human element that is starting to take, for the first time, a look at what kind of usage in those canyons can we have before we start degrading the resource to the point where it's either environmentally not sustainable or just affecting people's enjoyment of the canyon. So there are a lot of things like that this does that I don't think any organization could do. And if we don't fund it, it won't get funded. And I know was a question or concern about why Salt Lake County left. I think that was motivated more by the concern that Salt Lake County had coming out of the EIS process with UDOT, that other stakeholders were kind of interfering in their land use authority in the canyons, and they kind of wanted to pull back because of that. I know Catherine Cantor was spending a huge amount of time on that. We have been in conversations with the county about potentially coming back, maybe first as an ex officio member, but they need to be at the table. But I would say that their leaving wasn't because they didn't value that things that CWC has actually done. They were just kind of concerned that this was another forum where their land use authority might be challenged. So I don't know.
No, I appreciate all of that. I think that's really helpful. Can I ask you a pointed question?
Sure.
So you and I are part of an organization called the Conference of Mayors, and we get together monthly. I guess it's 8 months a year, because then the other 4 are Conference of Government meetings. But 8 months a year, we get together, we create agendas, we get together, we talk about issues. We've worked with the WFRC at times on homeless issues. We sit and we discuss it, and we don't do that with a paid organization. So we don't have to pay into the Conference of Mayors of all of these cities to create an organization that basically the CWC is doing. So our funds now are supporting an organization with employees. They're looking to hire somebody else now. And so what couldn't we accomplish? And I know that's hard to hear for the employers who do such a great job. And I meant to actually preface the comments with how impressed I am with the staff and what they do. But if that question,
I'm happy to answer that. I think it's a good question. And let me say this, I think all of us should be, constantly reevaluating the value proposition. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Conference of Mayors, to some extent, it's kind of like a club, okay, and a support group in a way. We address a lot of different issues in the Conference of Mayors, right? We have had to spend almost all of our summers for the last 3 years trying to find, temporary winter overflow shelter facilities, and that's taken up a huge amount of our time. We entertain their discussions where we invite Wasatch Front Regional Council to come in and talk about transportation stuff, and we invite in the League of Cities and Towns to talk about legislative updates. And the county comes and presents. Some of us are members of the urban county on CBDG grants, and we evaluate those as part of that process. And my argument to you about why the Conference of Mayors is not the adequate forum is because it has all of these different subject matters, and there is not time to focus on the mountains like the CWC does, where we spend the entire meeting talking about that. And we also invite in stakeholders that represent recreational interest, the ski resorts, the Forest Service, water rights interests, property rights interests. We convene all of those stakeholders and have these conversations about the mountains. And we wouldn't be able to spend the time at the Conference of Mayors in an hour a month that we are able to do in the CWC.
And if I may
Okay.
add,
Yeah.
the issues that the Central Wasatch create, for all the great things that we get from the Central Wasatch Mountains, the spiritual benefit, the recreational, physical benefits, they also create some issues, right? Because everyone here likes to visit them and likes to use them to recreate, right? And one of the motivations behind creating the Mountain Accord was to have concentrated, focused energy and attention on these issues. As Mayor Silvestrini said, they're so vast. There's some of they're the preeminent issues of the state, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased. I'm the director of the organization focused on these issues. But I truly believe that. The preeminent issues. And like Mayor Silvestrini said, I think the issues are complicated enough and varied enough. You started to mention this when you introduced the CWC. So the CWC focuses on economic issues, recreational issues, environmental issues, and transportation issues. Those four biggies, those four systems, as we call them, working interconnectedly in these mountains. So I think those issues are grave enough and urgent enough that they justify having the Central Wasatch Commission, just period.
So let me ask a question, Lindsay, because I think those are all really, really good points. So my frustration of our last meeting of seeing that basically our focus was going to be on, as we talked about the tenets of the accord and the focus would be on the land exchange program, which we kind of mentioned. Our residents are suffering on Wasatch Boulevard, the transportation issues because of the hold, because of the lawsuits. The value to me would be help us
Totally.
come up with solutions and ideas to help our residents on Wasatch Boulevard.
Totally.
Transportation is a major tenet, and I felt like I was told in our last meeting that's almost off the table over the next year. That wasn't going to be our focus. And so if I were to say I'm willing to fund for another year to vote for that and to be a part of it, how would the board react that the land exchange isn't enough for me to find value for an entire year's focus when transportation is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Cottonwood Heights?
Well, just on the surface, I would say completely valid. Okay,
Okay.
completely valid. So and let me say that the land exchange phrase is not, I call it the federal legislation, the CWNCRA. The land exchanges are one component of our federal legislation, which is the Central Wasatch National Conservation Recreation Area Act. Not enough words, if you ask me. CWNCRA for slightly shorter. And as Mayor Wickers mentioned, the land exchange component was one part of what that federal legislation proposed to do, just one part. And I can come in and give you a full rundown overview of what the legislation proposes to do, if that's desired. But in addition to the land exchanges, it would have placed permanent protections on the water. It would have created allowances for transportation corridors in the canyons, et cetera, et cetera. But what Mayor Wickers just said is focusing on the legislation is a big task. But for you just said that it is not enough for Cottonwood Heights. And I will say that now that the board has directed staff to refocus efforts and energy back to the legislation, it's been on hiatus since 2020 in order to allow UDOT to get through its transportation analyses in these canyons. Just because we're refocused effort and energy on the CWNCRA does not mean that our portfolio of work, many of that you're looking at right now, does not mean that our portfolio of work will end. So that means things like the bus bypass service that Mayor Silvestrini mentioned, that's going to keep going. Our short-term project grant program is going to keep going. Our convening efforts through our stakeholders council and our youth council will keep going, et cetera, et cetera. All of that will keep going. But what you said, all of those projects that you mentioned that came out of Mountain Accord, I would love to be able to do some of those in addition to pushing forward with the legislation. So I'm in the same boat as you.
So, and let me talk about the transportation and what CWC might be able to do or what the limitation is, you know. Where we are stuck on that right now is that the thing that we'd like to see happen, the expenditure of the money that was appropriated by the legislature for the phase 1 and phase 2 enhanced busing has been by UDOT frozen because of the lawsuit. The lawsuit that Salt Lake City and Metropolitan Water District are part of, and Sandy too, I think.
Sandy, Salt Lake City.
Challenges the entire EIS, and UDOT has taken the legal position that, well, if you're challenging the whole EIS, then we can't do anything. We can't do phase 1 and phase 2 either. So to some extent, I might question about whether that is kind of a political action to say, okay, if you're going to challenge us on that whole thing, then we're not going to give you any of the fruits that might make sense. And that is something the CWC might be able to lobby the legislature about, to free that money up and direct UDOT to spend it. I mean, that's something that has been some kind of administrative decision made by UDOT that could be overridden on the political level. And frankly, the CWC is a good entity to be able to do that. We have been successful getting legislative appropriations every year. Okay, so there is support in the legislature for this organization. So we may have some leverage there. Okay, that's something I'm not opposed to exploring. But the way that came up and the way Mayor Knut presented it, I think, was kind of a surprise to Salt Lake City and the Metropolitan Water District. And I think what I've told Dan is, Mayor Knut, you need to do some legwork on that first. You need to talk to, Laura Bree from Mayor Mendenhall and explain what you're trying to do before you throw this thing out there where you're trying to essentially do something that might undercut their legal position in a lawsuit. The other thing that CWC might be able to do, I don't know if the parties would trust us as a neutral broker, because Salt Lake City is a member, but pushing the parties or creating some incentive for them to mediate this dispute in some way, break that logjam on phase 1 and phase 2 anyway, is something we might be able to do, that we can pursue. I wouldn't write this off yet. I just think that the way it came up in our meeting, it was kind of an abrupt thing. And then maybe you, but Dan for sure was saying, I'm taking my toys and going home because nobody wants to address this. And I tried to talk to him about it. It's not that we don't want to address it. It's just that it's difficult to do that in the context of a public meeting without some conversations ahead of time to either prepare people for things or to learn their positions and know, that they're not, to try to get somebody to commit in an open meeting where that might be used against them in their lawsuit. That's the thing that I think that they were concerned about. So I'm not adverse to trying to help with that. I think that it's imperative that we all try to solve this transportation problem because it affects you more than anybody,
Yeah.
your residents, but it also affects all of the rest of us.
Yeah.
Okay, those of us that like to go skiing or even want to get from point A to point B on Wasatch Boulevard, that's an impediment. You got a route plan to get around that. So we can work on that.
Okay.
I wouldn't abandon it. I actually think that you might consider that having allies that you can generate support for that. We're going to be stronger going to the legislature if it's 5 or 6 cities along the Wasatch Front that are speaking with a unified voice, than if we all try to do that on our own.
Yeah. Well, and let me go to the council. I think I'm willing to fund another year with the intent, well, with the expression and I don't know what the right word is, to let the CWC know transportation, we need your help. And if we're gonna be a part of it, our residents need the help and it can't be, we can't just focus for a year on the land exchange. Yes.
The land exchanges are something that was like one element in there, but I don't care about land exchanges. That's the ski resorts might care about it,
Yeah,
but for Mill Creek, I don't care.
yeah, I know, exactly. Okay, sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
so glad to hear that you're willing to remain a member. I wanted, this is probably implicit, but I wanted to be explicit about it, that your voice as the commissioner representing Cottonwood Heights is essential to the work of the Central Wasatch Commission, okay? So the CWC would be weaker without Cottonwood Heights as a member, period.
Okay,
Okay.
no, thank you, appreciate that.
And so, but specifically about transportation, your voice is just as strong as any other commissioner at that dais during those meetings. So if you want to see more, if you want to see the CWC bulk up its transportation work, let's talk about that. Absolutely. I'm all ears. Okay.
Great.
Well,
No, I just kind of assumed that the council thoughts on, let me ask where you guys are.
Coming into this meeting, my thought after only having a few days to look at it was fund it, and this year's a performance review. We really have to show the value. I see the value in the conversation. I want to see the value in the action. You're talking about glacial, it has been glacial movement. The Mountain Accord was this remarkable coming together of stakeholders. And now CDMC is a government subdivision, political subdivision. Does it have the same stakeholders and stakeholder voices to advance what we need in Cottonwood Heights? One other quick thing, I see these canyons because they have, and I said it in my email, more visitors than even Zion National Park.
Yes.
And the burden is on the cities.
Yes.
This is a national and an international asset that we're being asked to fund. And it should be so much bigger and broader than that.
And that is the point of this legislation, to get a recreation area formed that would have a management plan separate from the national forest. It would maybe, and no offense to the national forest, but they are encumbered by federal regulations out the yin yang that limit their ability to be speedy or actually maybe even respond to a specific resource as opposed to their entire portfolio across the country. So that legislation that we're working for would allow this area to be managed separately, differently, with more nimbleness, So that's a goal that we've got, but I hear you in terms of trying to get some results, and I've heard Mayor Knoop talk about it too, and we'll work on that.
I had some reservations, because again, I'm a miser, but I'm in agreement. I'm okay with moving forward for another year, but I would like to see the impact. I would like to see the outcomes. I would also like to just suggest that we have representatives at the federal level that should be helping address this issue, and they should be hearing this voice in a manner that's very direct.
They have, okay, I
What are
talked
they
to them. Huh? Well, so and things may change with this administration, okay, but they have been in the minority party up until this year, for one thing. And then the other thing about this is that there is this tension between the state and the federal government in Utah.
Yeah, we
You
know
might have
that.
heard of
Yeah,
that.
Very, very much aware
And
of that.
so one of the things that we're working on at CWC is to maybe even relook at this legislation to be able to offer a carrot to the state to talk about how this is actually an opportunity for a little more local control than you might otherwise have if this is just a federal resource. So we have, and what Senator Curtis has told us, Senator Curtis took over from Representative Jason Chaffetz, who sponsored the bill initially. He said, we have to do some backfilling and get the state on board with this. Once legislative leadership and the governor are on board with this, we can take this to the Congress. So that's what we are working on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to emphasize what Jeff just said, then Representative, now Senator Curtis has been plugged into the CWNCRA and the CWC's work from the very beginning. And he's been an advocate, but all he's said is his condition was get your ducks in a row. We're still working on that, so.
I'd say pull in more of our federal representatives.
Yeah.
Rather than just one person.
One more question for Councilmember Highland and Councilmember Newell. What are the outcomes? What's one outcome that you want us to?
The influence mostly on the transportation end would be a big one. To go beyond just a voice.
Okay.
But actually someone that's listened to, an entity that's listened to.
Okay.
In a constructive way. And having that elevated to an understanding across the board would be really critical.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you, guys. We're gonna have to move into. our-
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate you. Yeah,
Okay.
appreciate
This
you.
is my district. Don't I get a chance to?
Yeah,
weigh in?
well, yeah, you were for what we just decided, so yeah, you're totally
Okay,
happy to move. it.
Okay, but I mean, everyone in this room needs to understand, when people say, why don't we just do with Little Cottonwood Canyon what they do with Zion National Park, timed entry, all these smart things? And it's because it's through the US Forest Service, not through the Park Service or a national. So I feel very strongly in all the years I've been studying this and trying to understand all these dynamics, that getting that national designation, which we all came so close to with Representative Chavez all those years ago, and to get the stars aligned and get someone like John Curtis to take a lead. And I can't imagine that Salt Lake County and a lot of these other entities wouldn't fall into line. And I mean, this is a very complicated subject that we could talk about, and I know we only dedicated 20 minutes. I'm sure we've gone beyond that. So I just want to say thank you to all my council colleagues. Again, I talked to Matt Holton earlier this afternoon. He's in Mexico. And he shared basically the sentiments that have been brought out, that he would support at least another year of membership, you know, with looking at whatever performance outcomes, you know, we can evaluate in a year from now. So I just wanted to go in the record to say I appreciate that we've all come together around this, and both Mayor Silvestrini and Lindsay Nielsen as the executive director here at the table with us. So
Yeah, thank you both.
all counts.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And I want to say that I was probably the only one in the room that was enjoying your budget discussion.
You understood every word, didn't you?
I did, and I'll tell you, I mean, obviously, we're going through the same thing, and I can just tell you that our discussion on Monday, we're talking about combined cost of living merit of about 4.5. So we're right in the ballpark with you guys at what you're talking about. So
It's a very Porsche dealership that's being built, and then the kind of revenues that you
some
have.
people love me, some people hate me.
Politics,
The problem is I can never own a Porsche now.
Yeah, you're telling me when a Porsche is coming.
I'll loan one for you. Jack.
If I did, I would be suspected.
Speaking of stakeholders, we have many of the Central Wasatch Commission stakeholders in the gallery. So if you wanted to connect with them, they're here. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to just a quick review. So Wednesday, April 16th, from 1:30 to 2:30 is our senior social. It's a scams and fraud prevention, and it's here at City Hall. We hope that'll be well attended. Saturday, April 19th, obviously, is the Easter egg hunt at Butler Park. You'd be shocked at how many kids are gonna be there on Saturday morning.
Just come for the entertainment.
Just
value,
come to
walk
watch,
in the mayhem.
exactly.
Yeah.
Friday, April 25th, from 6:30 to 8:30 is the Therapeutic Arts Night here at City Hall. Saturday, April 6th, from 9 to noon is the sapling sale at City Hall for trees. Did I say, yeah, Saturday the 26th? Saturday, June 6th, from 9 to 2 is the free community shredding event here at City Hall. And then Thursday, July 24th, the Saturday, July 26th, Butlerville Days, which we cannot believe that's actually.
And what's
on this-
missing on Saturday, April 26th also is Take Back Day, where we're collecting prescription medication.
Oh, yeah,
and
sorry,
everything. So
yeah.
that's missing
Thank
from
you
the
for,
calendar.
thank you
but
for
that
that
will be at
reminder.
the same
Thank you,
time.
sir.
Mayor, do you want to mention what we discussed yesterday? Or you gonna do that in the open meeting?
Remind me, Matt.
The race.
Oh, yeah. So we want, so I'm gonna do it in the
Okay,
business
well, I
meeting
just
where we have
wanted
more
to make
people.
sure.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm gonna entertain a motion to, leave our work session and go into a closed meeting.
Oh, I will motion to adjourn the work session. Or we adjourn or do
To
we
leave
to
the,
leave the work session to open a closed meeting? And anything else?
you can say at the end of the closed meeting, adjourn the work session, right?
Yeah, I think that's as far as we need to go. right now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, all of what that said.
Then Sean, you guys
I'll
second,
second.
all in favor, say